Okay, friends, we have to look at a very difficult piece of Torah that we need to understand. And this is all in preparation of Pesach and the Geula that we're going to go through, Be'ezrat Hashem, the redemption, in less than 30 days. There is a mitzvah, Shloshim Yom Lefnei HaChag, 30 days before the Chag, to start discussing the ideas, the machshavot, and the halachot of Pesach. And so Pesach occurs 30 days after Purim. There is a strong custom among our people to start learning on Purim itself. I know many Rabbanim who during Purim, they will stop the Su'udah and start to learn a little bit of Torah about Pesach and open a Shulchan Aruch and learn some halachot in Hilchot Pesach on Purim. Why? Because 30 days, Lifnei HaChag, 30 days before the Chag, we start to discuss Pesach. The question I want to explore for a few minutes today is why the Jewish people had to be slaves in Egypt for 210 years. What happened to our people, my dear friends, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said you need to be avadim? Why did our people begin with such a challenge of being slaves? Why couldn't we begin as successful people, as powerful people? What is the idea of us being slaves? Why avadim hayinu leparo b'Mitzrayim? Avadim. Why avadim? It's such a lowly position. There's nothing lower than an eved. An eved is poor. An eved is not free. An eved has no time to study. An eved has no time to go on vacation. They're working 24/7 to their master. What is it? What is it about the Jewish people that we had to begin as avadim? Such humble and meek beginnings. What is the secret behind this? So the Gemara tells us something unbelievably fascinating, that actually this decision to make the Jewish people avadim goes back to the days of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was promised by Hashem that his descendants would be slaves in Mitzrayim, and that eventually they would leave Mitzrayim and would be given the land of Eretz Yisrael. That is the promise that was made. And this you can see, my friends, in Parashat Lech Lecha, chapter 15 of the book of Genesis, Bereshit, Pasuk 7, 8, and 9. And over there, Hashem says, don't worry, Avraham Avinu, your descendants are going to be slaves. He doesn't say to whom, by the way, because no nation had been chosen to take on this mission of being the slave owners of the Jewish people. That's not a position you want. You do not want to be in a position of being a slave owner of Am Yisrael and Klal Yisrael. It's not going to end good. And it didn't end good. Later on, the Egyptians, as it were Kivachol, volunteered that position. But right now, we're not told. However, when Avraham Avinu was told that his descendants would be slaves and be given the land of Eretz Yisrael right afterwards, Avraham Avinu turns around to Hashem and says a very weird statement. Vayomer Adonai Elohim bema eda ki irashena. How am I going to know that my descendants will go free from Egypt and be given the land of Eretz Yisrael? Rashi over there says that Avraham Avinu did not deny the fact that his descendants would need to go through Avdut. However, there was a little safek, there was a little doubt in Avraham Avinu, and we can't say this, but Chazal tell us, there was a little lack of emunah in Avraham Avinu that his descendants would be given the land of Eretz Yisrael. This lack of emunah, which was very small, almost minute, remained with Avraham Avinu, and actually somehow spiritually it was put into the DNA of the Jewish people. This lack of emunah has remained with us for a long, long time. Because of this, the Jewish people had to go through the Egyptian exile, Galut Mitzrayim. That's what Rashi tells us. When he says, how am I going to know? He says, Lo Yerusha ha'eretz she'alo od v'amala b'meda. How am I going to know? And the Gemara, Rav Abahu in the Gemara says, Avraham Avinu, there needs to be a little bit of work on your neshama. And so let's put these two pieces together, my dear friends. There is a direct connection between being in galut, being in exile, which I think we all know we're in right now, and building our emunah. The fact we're in galut, the fact that we are among the other nations, many of whom want to hurt us and are hurting us to this day, is actually there as a remedy for the lack of emunah that's inside all of us. I mean, if it was in Avraham Avinu, in a very minuscule amount, obviously, then it can be inside his descendants, us, the Jewish people. And so let's have a look at this once again. The problem is a little bit of lack of emunah. The solution is galut. That's what Avraham Avinu was told, and that's what's going to have to be the scenario and situation until Mashiach comes. Why? Why is galut? Why would it be that exile of the Jewish people, taken out of the safety of Eretz Yisrael, put among the other nations, whether as slaves or as victims of anti-Semitism, why is that the solution to galut? This question plagued me. This question of why galut is the solution for the lack of emunah, faith in God, plagued me until last night. Last night I was in this room with a number of young men and women, and we had the tremendous zchut of having a lady whose name was Enav Danino. Her son, Rahman Aslan, Ori, is right now in the ultimate galut experience. How else can I describe being a hostage to Hamas Yamach Shimam? He was taken on October 7th. Actually, he was at the festival. He was able to get out because he heard, she couldn't tell us how, but he heard that there was an attack that was happening at that moment. He jumped into his car with a bunch of people he gathered together, and he drove out to safety. However, he felt this tremendous remorse and guilt about having survived this attack. He dropped off all the people, he turned his car around, she said, and he drove back into Hamas hands. And he arrived there, and they shot bullet holes throughout his car, and they opened the car door, and they grabbed him, and they took him into Gaza. From that moment to this moment, she has no idea of his condition. Nothing. Whether he's alive, whether he's dead, chas v'chalila, no clue. She came here to open up her heart. And by the way, let me be very clear with you. I believe one of the greatest mitzvot we can do right now, 2024, is listening and opening our hearts and sharing in the pain, being noseh, the holding on to the pain, the ol chaveirah, of the yoke of what these poor people, we can't even fathom what these poor men and women, the family, whether it's parents or children or grandchildren or siblings or family or friends of these people who are taken against their will by Hamas Yamach Shimam, we can't even fathom what they're going through. Just listening to them, opening our hearts, shedding a tear, saying Tehillim. We said Tehillim together. She did Hafrashat Chala. We all answered Amen to our bracha. She had dough that was set up. Before she came to this event, it was the most amazing experience. Just being there and listening and opening our hearts to these poor people. I mention her now because I have to admit, if I was in the situation, I don't know if my level of emunah, of faith, would be at hers. But let me be very clear with you. She said very clearly, I don't question Hashem. I have faith in a Kadosh Baruch Hu that everything that is happening to me and my family is Yad Hashem. I cry. I pray for my son's return, but God willing, B'ezrat Hashem, it will happen very, very soon. But I don't question Hashem. This level of faith of emunah, my friends, doesn't appear overnight. It has to be worked on. The galut that this young boy, Ori Donino, is in, and the galut that his parents are in. His parents are in the ultimate galut. They're in the ultimate darkness and choshech of not knowing if their son is alive. And if he is, what condition he is in. He's well, not well, sick, no idea. But let me be very clear with you. Emunah is not a light switch you can just turn on in one moment. It has to be worked on. It takes time. And actually her case, which is why I mention her as evidence of emunah, goes back many years before. Because this young son of hers is 25 years old. But when he was 13 years old, she said that her son was about to become bar mitzvah. And he got into a terrible car accident. And the doctors told her he's not going to live. This is it. Imagine this, hearing this before bar mitzvah. And she said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you let my son survive and become bar mitzvah and be healthy once again, I'm never going to question anything you do to me or my family. I'm going to let it be. That is the condition she made to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at this time. The doctors said miraculously, this young 12-year-old boy completely had a 180 and he survived this terrible accident. He was bar mitzvah and there was no sign at all in his health that he'd been through this accident. And then, a little over 10 years later, she finds her son in a situation of ultimate galut and darkness in the captivity of probably the sickest people in the world today, Hamas. And she said, my faith has not wavered from that time. When I made that condition to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my faith has been strong. She says, I cry, but she says, when I went to see the car, which I was told not to do, that my son was shot at, and there were bullet holes throughout, she said, I stood there with 3 policemen who were crying at what we were looking at, and she said, I started to sing Mizmor Todah. Can you believe that? You know what level of emunah it takes? Looking at the bullet-riddled car that your son was driving to save other Jewish people, that he was taken into captivity, and you're able at that moment, looking at that car, to sing to Hashem praises, Mizmor Todah. And these policemen who are crying said, how can you sing a praise of thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at this terrible, terrible time? And she said, because I have faith in Hashem, I have emunah that I've been working on for years and years of saying Tehillim for my son every single day. My faith is not going to waver. I don't question Hashem. I cry and I pray. But my faith has not wavered one iota. Her entire life and all the occurrences that happened to her and her family had led her to this one moment. Is she going to break? Or is she going to be a source of emunah, of comfort to Am Yisrael and Klal Yisrael at this time? And we said Tehillim, we did our Freshet Challah, and she walked out, and then I saw something that I had to video. She started to give brachot to the dozens of women who had come to her, and she hugged them, and she kissed them, and she gave them chizuk. All right, it was like we should be there to give her chizuk strengthening at this time. No, not in her case. She hugged them and she kissed these women and she gave them chizuk, where they were looking for shidduch, where they were looking for refuah shlema, and she gave them, they were crying, and she was giving them brachot. That's how she approached this moment in her life. You see, my friends, galut, the rabbis tell us, this is what Rabbi Abahu in the Gemara was telling us. Galut, somehow, being in the darkness of exile, somehow has the power and the ability to lift us up and to help us bring emunah. And that is why Avraham Avinu's descendants had to go into galut. Why? Because there's some lack of emunah that existed among us, and it's understandable. 210 years stuck in Mitzrayim, you're going to cry out only to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the Egyptians did nothing to help us. And so it built up our emunah and our faith with Hashem, and that faith we took with us out of Mitzrayim. We took with us into the Midbar. We took with us into Eretz Yisrael. We took with us into the 4 galuts that we would have to go through for other reasons throughout our history. And it's still with us today that we can have people, and she's one of many, that can stand here while our own son is in captivity and say, oh, Mizmor Todah, thank you Hashem, I love you Kodesh Baruch Hu. But you're going through galut, the worst possible galut. You're in Choshech Mitzrayim. She's like, I know. I was prepared for this. Mizmor Todah. Thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That, my friends, is why galut is the answer to the lack of emunah. You would have thought the way to build emunah is for Hashem to give us amazing experiences. Amazing, happy experiences does not build our emunah. It builds our hakarat hatov, our gratitude to Hashem. But if you want to build and work on your emunah, like you want to work on a muscle, you need to have resistance. Muscles do not grow without some form of resistance. You can lift a 1 pound weight. It's not going to build your muscle. There needs to be resistance. The more weight, the more muscle is built. The more resistance, the more emunah that is built, the more challenge. There is an opportunity. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee. Just because you're having pain, challenge, darkness in your life, it's not a guarantee that suddenly your emunah is going to grow. Many people, Aleinu, Rahman al-Islam, fall down. You know, I read, I think Viktor Frankl speaks about this in Man's Search for Meaning. He says that many people during and after the Holocaust were broken and lost their faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But he said there were many people who went through the Holocaust experience whose faith in Hashem actually grew exponentially after the Holocaust. We've all heard those extreme stories. So he wanted to figure out what's the difference? What's the difference between those people whose faith broke after the Holocaust and moved away and never mentioned being Jewish ever again, and those people who became tzaddikim and chassidim and were able somehow to have their faith grow? And he said, I'll tell you what it was. The way you went in is the way you came out. Those people, he said, who went into the camps that he himself was in, who went in with a little bit of faith in God, left with extreme faith in God. Those people who were lacking faith, maybe they're going through the motions of being a religious Jew. Those people who went through the motions of being in a faith situation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, their faith went away. But if you go in with a little bit, and then you're challenged, and you want to grow in faith, it's going to grow exponentially through that choshech, through that darkness. And he said that's the difference. If you went in with a little, you came out with a lot. If you went in with none, you went out with nothing. That is the secret of Galut Mitzrayim. It's actually the secret of every Galut, and we are all here in Chutz La'aretz, actually in Eretz Yisrael. You do know that that is also Galut, right? I know we like to think that being in Eretz Yisrael, we're outside of Galut. No, Galut exists right now in Eretz Yisrael as well. We have to see this somehow with an opportunity to grow in our emunah. The quicker and fastest we grow in emunah, the quicker HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be like, okay, you've had your lesson, the inoculation has worked, the antibiotics are working, I can now take you out of Galut to enjoy the final Geula of Mashiach B'mehera B'yamenu. Amen. It should be a zchut for us, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu should allow us to see the ultimate redemption very, very soon. Chazaka Baruch. Have a great day.